Good evening, everyone. We are live. It is a weekday. I'm Dwayne Whitmer. So here we are for another weekly Whitmer with a little bit of a problem. Hamburg got hit with a massive snowstorm last week, which led to some flooding and some issues, and got a little bit of water damage coming through my roof. Got to fix this spring. Looking forward to that. Absolutely miserable time. So yeah, that's what I got to deal with today. So great water stain on my flag. Bought a new one. It should come next week. But hey, that's what happens when you live in a town where you get 6 feet of snow in a week. This week, we're going to talk about activism, the difference between electoral activism, which is just running for office or voting, different types of activism, why activism is hard, why activism is the greatest thing you can do to make your life better, and why sometimes people stop doing activism, and whether it's, following the wrong group, getting bought out, government job, there's things like that. So the first thing is there's different very forms of activism. And one thing I look at is activism versus electoral politics. And one thing is politicians aren't always activists. Politicians are people that are running for office because they want a paycheck. I have zero faith in any politician to do anything correctly at this point in time. I have no faith in any single politician doing anything correctly. And so when it comes to activism, there's different levels of activism, and voting in itself is a form of activism. You go, you vote. And I would argue that voting is probably the laziest form of activism. You go and say, I voted, I made a difference. Really, you're like Ralph from The Simpsons. I'm helping. Really, all you're really helping is the system of government, which is a criminally oppressive organization, continue its oppressiveness over us. Neither party is going to help us. Neither party cares about us. Both parties are a major jobs program that only care about winning elections so they get the power and influence that comes with winning said election. If they win elections, they can appoint their friends to jobs. They can dictate where they allocate tax dollars, usually people that donate to them. It's a big reason why everyone hates Nikki Haley right now, and never Nikki. I saw on The View that people said, Nikki Haley said, oh, well, Republicans aren't going to vote for me because I'm brown. Well, no, Nikki, most people aren't going to vote for you because you support bombing brown countries in areas that the average kid in school can't find on a map because government schools have failed. And you think that's a win because that's who donates to you. You're supporting your donors by expanding our military industrial complex. It's not because you think you're brown. It's because you're terrible. You're a war hawk. So voting is a very low budget form of activism because you do it once a year, maybe once every 4 years, and you think, well, I voted, I solved the problem. Another form of activism that people overlook is paying taxes. Paying taxes has made activism kind of it's competed because people think that if I pay taxes, I care about the homeless, I care about the roads, I care about the schools. And when I pay taxes, I'm helping the poor and the roads and the schools. And really all you're doing is giving money to a government-sponsored Ponzi scheme that takes your tax dollars and hires their friends and families and gives tax benefits to their donors. But you don't think about it like that. It's a very low IQ, low mentality form of activism where you think, well, I pay taxes, therefore the roads are fixed, therefore there's no poverty. Now, politicians use that as a way to keep you kind of stupid, right? Well, if you don't pay more taxes, hey, if you don't pay more taxes, the ice caps are going to melt. If you don't pay more taxes, we're not going to solve poverty. If you don't pay more taxes, we're never going to solve racism. If you don't pay more taxes, Mexican cartels are going to abort your children. You got to pay more taxes. And that's how they get keen to people. Well, hey, I want to do something. I'll pay taxes, helping. Bare minimum form of activism. So then you get into real activism, which is direct action, joining causes, fighting for causes, even pulling out of politics is I'd argue not voting is a greater form of activism because it doesn't empower the machine. I think that voting just empowers the criminal organization that is the government to maintain its power. So not voting is a bigger form of activism, but that's a whole other conversation in itself. So, they say, well, Dwayne, is activism hard? Why should I do activism? Why activism? Why direct action? Well, it's because it's something you can control. I can't control a politician. I can't control a bureaucrat. I can't control legislation. I can't control the government. And you say, well, the Constitution controls the government. They don't give a shit about the Constitution. They give a shit about winning re-election to keep the power and influence scheme they have. You control yourself. You control what activism you do, what you pick, what you limit. If your activism is, hey, Dwayne, I really care about the homeless, nothing is stopping you from going and feeding the homeless. Now you're going to say, what about regulations? What about codes? Hey, look, civil disobedience is activism, right? Going and helping the homeless, volunteering at a kitchen, volunteering at a battered women's shelter, doing something that gets you off your ass and not eating, bonbons and watching Netflix. Doing something is activism. And that gets started. You control yourself, you control your schedule, you control what you like, what you don't like. Look, if you want to be the most gung-ho ANCAP activist in the world and you stop paying taxes and you build and sell machine guns, legally you probably should consult with your local laws first. I'm not an attorney and telling you to do this. But look, if that's your activism, you're doing activism. Good for you. If it's volunteering at a soup kitchen, that's good for you. If it's helping the homeless, good for you. If it's talking to people why racism is bad, good for you. You control that. Therefore, you celebrate the wins in your life that you get. If I vote for a candidate and they win, it's equivalent to the Bills. Look, the Bills just took a massive L on Sunday. Everyone's upset. Grown men crying over a sports team is something else. But look, that's not voting, supporting a politician. It's like supporting a sports team. They don't know you exist and they don't give a shit about you. They lose, they don't care, they get a paycheck. They win, they don't care, they get a paycheck. Now, some of them do care about winning and losing, but really at the end of the day, it's their job and they're playing a game to maximize their income. Very similar to politicians. At the end of the day, politicians want to win re-election to maximize their paycheck and their pension. Really, that's it. They want to control their power. So why does activism struggle? Why do people struggle to do activism? Well, I think it's three things. And here's one of my greatest conspiracy theories that I ever came up with today, actually, is I have a theory that the government doesn't teach how to do your taxes, how to do a budget, how to pay your bills, how to manage your finances. We don't teach that in school because we don't want you to know how to do that. We want you to think the American dream, a house you can't afford and a car you can't afford that you don't need, to impress neighbors that you don't really like, so that you're forever in debt. And why do you do that? Because if you're forever in debt, you're constantly working. If you're a debt slave, you're constantly working to pay off that debt, to pay that next bill. You don't have time to do anything else. You don't have time to work on helping the homeless, on solving racism, on solving world hunger. You don't have time. You work, you have a few hours to refresh, and then you start your next day. And then on weekends, you got to fix your house. Now, if you didn't have, living paycheck to paycheck and struggling to pay off your debt, you'd have more time. And that's really the big issue there is, why do people struggle to do activism? Well, part A is because they don't have time. They're stuck paying all their debts and every waking minute struggling to pay off their bills. So then what happens? In comes Father Government saying, look, buddy, if you just let me take 35% of your income, I'll solve all the problems that you think are problems. In comes massive Ponzi scheme. Another reason why activism is hard to do is because people are generally lazy. And that's where government comes in and takes advantage of that. Hey, activism is hard. You might have to take time out of your day to go do something, right? You might have to get up, and I can't binge watch something on Netflix. I can't eat Cheetos all day. I have to go and actually volunteer my time to help the homeless. Well, I don't want to do that because I'm tired. I had a long day, I'm stressed. Activism it's hard. It requires sacrifice. It requires people do something. And a lot of people are generally beat down by the governmental system and they don't want to do it. And then lastly, people feel like it doesn't matter, right? And I think that on a large scale scope of things, if I donate an hour of my time this weekend to go help feed the homeless, is it going to solve world hunger? No. Is it going to solve poverty? No. Is racism going to be cured? No. So they say, well, it's not worth it. I fully disagree with that. I think that it makes it worth it because it shows that you're willing to put the time in, and one person doing one thing is better than no one doing anything. You build off that and you get wins. If I go and help feed the homeless, I did something. I win. I accomplished something. I didn't solve it. I didn't cure it. I didn't fix it, but I did something that mattered to someone else. And I think those are the wins. Now, Why is it hard to do activism long term? Because you may not see massive results. You got to understand that, it may be hard to see huge wins. It may be hard to see massive results, but starting local in your community is a great start. Plus, sometimes activism, you don't even have to use other people. Look, if money's tight and you grow a garden, it gets you outside, you're getting that sunlight, you're learning a valuable skill that may be needed. Look, we're on Civil War II and World War III are on the verge of happening at the same time. So, hey, you might need to learn how to grow crops. You might need to learn how to forage, but you're learning a skill. You're getting outside. You're taking care of yourself. One of the forms of activism that I started to learn is kind of homesteading-ish. I live in a suburb, so I really can't do a ton of that, but it's, learning to grow my own crops, learning to, have chickens and stuff. And it's not because I'm saving a ton of money. It's mostly, it gets me outside. It relieves stress. It's completely stress-free. There's no competition. There's a challenge to it, but it's not impossible. I'm not competing with anyone. I'm not struggling. I'm outside. I'm in nature. I'm enjoying the time. It's relaxing. It's stress-free. So it's a form of therapy for me. And I've started a garden, and it's coming along. It's not going to feed a family of 4 forever, but it's enough where look, I'm starting to see crops. I'm starting to see things happening. I'm starting to see growth, and that excites me. And in theory, that's a form of activism, right? Because as I talked with Jim Ostrowski last week, one of the greatest forms of activism you can do is taking care of yourself and your body. That is a form of activism because one of the largest expense our government has is Medicare and health costs. And so by taking care of yourself, you're restricting the government's control they have on you when it comes to taking care of your health costs, your physical health costs. And that in itself, taking care of yourself is a great form of activism. So that, why is it so hard? Because I can eat 4 slices of pizza, which tastes really good, or I can eat something better and go to the gym. But if I go to the gym, I'm not going to be able to watch Netflix. It's the same thing. It's back to that same thing. And really, that's why we've pushed voting and we've pushed excuse me. I got a pop-up. That's weird. We've pushed voting as active. We pushed paying taxes active. Hey, don't worry about doing things. Just pay your taxes and vote. We'll take care of it. That's what it's become. And I think that it's time we start to push back on that mindset where if you're paying taxes, you're not really helping the homeless. You're mostly contributing to blowing up brown countries and paying off our massive debt because our politicians don't know how to balance a checkbook, probably because most of them went to government schools where you don't learn how to balance a checkbook. And we have massive debt. I think our 3rd largest expense is interest on the massive debt we have, which is insane. Imagine if you lived in a household and your 3rd largest expense was interest on your debt, which actually may be true in some households because, like I said earlier, the whole debt slave mentality. That's not a good thing. That shouldn't be happening. So, this week talked about some activism, talked about why you should do activism, talking about getting excited to do activism. Look, it's a really rewarding thing. It's also very humbling. I've helped a couple times feeding the homeless and working with the homeless, and it's kind of humbling because even when I'm having a bad day, I do have a house to come home to, even though there's a massive leak in it. I have shelter. I'm not worried about where I'm going to sleep tonight. I'm not worried if it gets too cold. Am I going to be okay? I have a heat. I have light. I have electric, and it is kind of a humbling experience to see that it could always be worse, no matter how bad your day is going, and that kind of keeps you humble and honest and making sure that you're not taking for granted what you have. I think a lot can be learned there. Plus, you make really good connections. You see the good in people. As someone who's in politics, I see the bad in people all the time because I think politicians are probably the biggest bags of shit that have ever been developed in society. And when you're out there in the real world and you're helping these people, you see people of all ages, all creeds, all genders, all races. You see everyone come together to help. And it's really kind of an encouraging thing, especially when you see, like I said earlier, Civil War 2.0 and World War III on the horizon. When you're out seeing members of your community coming together to work together, we just had a snowstorm here in Buffalo. To see neighbors shoveling out neighbors, neighbors bringing supplies to neighbors, it really kind of shows you that no matter what our politicians are doing, our politicians like to send our country's poor to fight other countries' poor to kill each other so that they can get rich people to give them money. When you're really working with the people, you see that that's not really representative of the greater society, our politicians are just absolute shitbags. And it helps you kind of restore faith in humanity, really. So look, at the end of the day, if you're bored, you want something to do, find what you like, find how you can do activism, and find how you can get involved and do it. It's a great time. I encourage everyone to find out some form of direct action they like. And throughout the year, like I said, I'll have various people who do different forms of direct action on to talk about it, why they do it, how they do it, why it's good. I'm going to try to get Dan Warmus here next week, who's a First Amendment auditor. His form of direct action is doing First Amendment audits and investigations into government. I've started doing something similar with Act Now Media, which is essentially accountability, consistency, transparency in government, to see how government responds to certain things. Do they treat everyone equally? Do they treat everyone fairly? The answer is no, they don't. That adds up. I can tell you right now, they don't. And investigating government malfeasance and not assuming that government has the presumption of correctness. And that's really what I started doing there. And that's an eye-opening experience. And it's frustrating to see how the political class views the pissed on class like you and I. They view us as, useless people who are there to bother them. They don't view it as customer service. They don't view it as representation. They view it as, what do you want? You're interrupting my day. And so when I do activism, it, restores faith in humanity after dealing with the political class, a couple hours a week. So thank you guys for tuning in. Next Wednesday or Thursday, I'm not sure. I think it's gonna be next Wednesday next week. I won't have the leak issues. I should have a new flag so you don't have the watermark stain on mine. I'm a little bummed about that. But thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you have a great week. Stay warm if you're in Western New York. It's warming up a little bit. Hope your basements aren't flooding or you don't have a leak in your house like I do. But thanks, guys, for tuning in. Have a good week. As always, please consider getting involved locally and doing great forms of activism to make your community a better place. Don't rely on politicians to solve your problems because they're not. Thank you guys for tuning in. Have a great one. Take care, guys.